Hi, this is Trevor Conquergood, and today's video I'm going to tell you about Press and Bond Ultra, which is a really awesome adhesive that you can fuse onto fabric and then fuse that to another piece of fabric. And so it's great for putting patches onto your jeans and that kind of stuff like that. And so I'm going to show you how to do two different flower applique patch type designs today, and they're both ironed onto the blue jeans, no sewing required. And so if you're ready to get started, I'm going to take you through the steps to make both of these patches. And the first one we're going to do is the applique of the flower by itself, and then we'll look at how to turn it into more of like a traditional patch. And so two different techniques, and the first technique includes the Floriani Press and Bond Ultra, as well as the Floriani Power Mesh Cutaway, and this could be in beige or white or black. It really won't matter. I picked beige because it kind of just blends in with the flower, but the idea is we're going to be appliquing this flower onto that mesh stabilizer, and then we're going to burn it out later. And you might notice the perfect grip tape that I've used in the hoop, just to help the hoop to hold the really lightweight material of that power mesh cutaway. And so to get started, you applique the flower onto the power mesh. So essentially you lay your pink fabric on top of the cutaway, and you stitch the first color of the design, which is a run stitch. And when it's finished, you'll remove the hoop from the machine and you'll trim with your scissors around that flower. And once that is fully trimmed, you go back to the embroidery machine and you complete sewing all of the rest of the colors of the flower. So essentially we applicate a beautiful flower onto our stabilizer, and now it's time to add the Press and Bond Ultra, and that is an adhesive that we can use to make it an iron-on flower. And notice when I roll it out, it says on the roll, place it this side down. Essentially the glue is on the inside of the roll, so once you cut your piece, if it has a bit of a curve to it like this, you'll know that the adhesive is on the inside of that curve. And like I said, the pattern, the paper is printed with text to tell you which side to put it. Now you go to the iron, and I use a hand iron. I set it to cotton setting, and it just takes a moment to kind of like tack it down. So I'll hold it with my two fingers and I'll put the iron onto it just for a second, and it kind of like sticks the two together. Now I can let go with my fingers and put the whole iron over top of the whole piece and hold it for about 10 seconds. And after about 10 seconds, it will be fully bonded together. And so the next thing you'll do is let that cool. And it usually takes 30 seconds to a minute, and it's fully cool to the touch. And once it's cool to the touch, you can remove the waxy paper from the backside. So notice right now I simply have picked up the fused piece, but if I turn it over on the backside, I can remove that sort of transfer paper, and all of the adhesive has left my transfer paper and is now actually on the back of our embroidery. This is all covered in like a shiny fusible adhesive. And now it's time to burn it out, and that's where you're going to use your heat craft tool, and you'll get it good and hot, and you'll literally trace around the flower. You can touch right along the edge of the embroidery. It'll melt the stabilizer much faster than it could melt any of the threads, and so trace right along the embroidery. Just keep moving with the tool. Of course, it's very hot and it can melt the thread if you leave it there, but if you just kind of keep going around, it easily cuts that flower right out of the mesh. And you can just pull the mesh away, and you will have made a freestanding applique flower that has adhesive on the back. And that is totally perfect for ironing on to another sort of piece of fabric, like a bag or some shirt or your jeans. And so that's what we did, is we put the flower onto the pants and put the iron one more time over top of the flower until it was hot, 10 seconds, and it fully sticks on there, and it's like a permanent bond. So that is super fun, and that is the first flower technique. And the second one is similar but also different. And so now we're going to make the patch an applique or iron-on patch. And we're going to use green fabric. We're also going to use pink fabric, and we're going to use the R&K stitch and shape and we're going to hoop our wet and gone. So you're basically going to applique your patch onto the wet and gone. And the stitching shape is what makes it stiff. So the first thing you're going to actually want to do is hoop up your wet and gone. And once again, we use that perfect grip tape just to make sure that the wet and gone is held really well by the hoop while we're doing our embroidery. And now we fuse a piece of the stitching shape to the back of the green fabric, and the stitching shape is quite rigid and strong. It's like a craft felt, but it's fully washable and much stronger and stiffer. And it's what will give the structure and the strength to our patch. So once you've fused it to the back of the green fabric, you simply lay that on top of the hoop where you've hooped up your wet and gone. And it's not wrong to use some of the, embroidery perfection tape to tape it down, but it's really not that required either, because the first stitches of the design will sew the two together, and the first stitches of the design is a run stitch. It's just going to sew those two together, and then you're going to use your scissors to trim the excess material. So you're appliquing your patch onto wet and gone. And when you trim, you want to do a really good job and trim nice and close to that run stitch so that none of it sticks out on the outside of your satin border that's going to finish that shape, when it finishes embroidering. And so now we've fully trimmed all of our sort of green pieces away, and you can see that it's nice and trimmed. And I like to use my applique wave scissors because they're really sharp and have a nice point to them. But use your best applique scissors to trim it out is what I'm saying. You'll know how well it's going when it sews the underlay. If your underlay is fully covering, where you've trimmed, then you've done perfect. If the underlay starts sewing and there's still some sticking out on the other side of it, you might want to stop and trim to get it better. But the one thing I can give you is when you're doing the trimming back here, maybe just kind of bend the fabric up at like a 90-degree, because it is quite stiff and it makes it a little bit easier to get nice and close, I find, when you bend it up like that. So when you're finished with embroidering it, it should have a satin stitch edge surrounding the patch, and it's been appliqued onto wet and gone, and so you can finish embroidering your patch. In our case, we're going to do another applique, and we're going to applique that flower onto the green patch fabric and finish the embroidering. So now we've fully embroidered our patch, and it's still in the hoop, so you can go ahead and take it out of the hoop and use your scissors to trim the wet and gone kind of close to the material, as close to the stitching as you can, but leave a little edge. Careful not to cut your embroidery, but not leave too much to get rid of. And now to get rid of that last little bit of water dissolving stabilizer, the wet and gone, you can just wet your finger. I'll dip my finger into the running water of a sink and just touch the edge of the patch, and it just simply goes away, and you're finished, left with a beautifully finished edge around your patch like that. And so now that you've made your patch, now we can add the adhesive. So it's not like the previous patch where we put the adhesive on before we burned it out. This time we actually fully make the patch, and then what we're going to do is we're going to roll out some of the adhesive, and we're going to put our patch directly onto it and just use like a pencil to trace the shape of your patch. And so when you're done, and I do that right to the inside of the patch, can you see this is curling up? So I've put my patch directly where it's going to go onto the Press and Bond Ultra, and I draw that line with a pencil. And now I get my scissors and I trim, and I'll trim the exact shape. So I'm now left with a piece of Press and Bond Ultra that is the matching shape to my patch. And so then you take it to your iron, and you want to be careful. And once again, I'll hold the patch with 2 fingers and just tap it with the iron to kind of set the corner over here. Then I can let go with my hand and put the iron over the whole patch, and once again hold down for about 10 seconds with your iron set on cotton/linen. And when you're done, it'll be permanently bonded onto the back of the patch. And so now you've made an iron-on applique patch, and to add it to your pants or to a bag, you would need to remove the waxy paper that was part of the Press and Bond Ultra, and you'll notice that your patch now has an adhesive all covering the whole back of it. And now when you take it and you iron it onto your jeans, it'll be like a permanent bond. And that is how you can use the Floriani Press and Bond Ultra to create an applique, floral patch, or an actual embroidery patch. And I hope you enjoyed today's video. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.